So, hello, my name is Jason Kwong. I am the webinar presenter for today. I'm an engineer at Arup, and this is the Oasys PRIMER Renumbering Tool webinar. So, we're going to look at the tools available on Primer in order for you easily to model a range of label IDs, or you can do them individually if you wish. And some of these tools should allow you to have more control of how you read all the different different keywords that we have, especially in a master keyword where it has got multiple includes. It really helps to have them in individual ranges so that multiple people can work on different includes at the same time without having the risk of clashing when being imported back into a master keyword file. So we're going to go through a list of numbering tools Primer have. So the demos we're going to show in this webinar are is using Primer 16, Oasys Primer 16.0. I know some of you will have got an email earlier today to say the release of 16.1 has just been uploaded, so you can download it from the Oasys software website. But for the current webinar, we're going to use Oasys 16.0. Much of the functionality will be the same, if not identical. I know there are a couple of bug fixes, but that shouldn't interfere with what we're showing today. So all functionalities should be the same between 16.0 and 16.1, so you can use either, and it'll be applicable for both software development versions. Okay, so first of all, where is the renumbering tool? When you read in a model using Primer, under the model button here, where my mouse is on one, you will be able to see a panel of blue buttons, and one of the options on the third column from the left and at the top, there's the renumber button. So clicking that allows you to access all the tools we have for renumbering. And if you've got multiple models, you can select which model you want to use the tool on. So you can see on screen, it will be 1 by default, but you can also choose other models if they're already in. And not all of these blue buttons will be active. It will depend on how many models you've got active and what content it's got in the model. So I'm going to just give a brief summary of the list of the renumbering tools we have. So renumber content, that allows you to easily renumber a range of elements based on their current ID. And on top of that, you can choose to renumber based on the keyword type as well. And 2, you've got the change model ID, and that just simply changed the single model number that's associated with it. So that's a relatively simple procedure. And you've got a condensed model ID. If you've got multiple model read in and they're not ordered sequentially, you can simply click that button to condense it so that it renumber all the model IDs sequentially, starting from 1. Renumber selection, you can choose specific type of objects you want to model based on a screen pick option. So the user can select on screen what they want to renumber, and you can then carry out the renumbering functions based on your selection. Set material ID to part ID. This allows every single part card to model to associate to reference a material ID that is the same as the part ID. So this is useful if you've got, for example, rigid material which has got a constraint, and you don't want that constraint to be carried across all part. You can press this button and it will generate a duplicate material ID to be the same so that they can act independently, for example. Material 24, LCSS and LCSR. So material 24 is the piecewise modified plasticity, piecewise linear plasticity. And within it, you can reference a low curve or a table. So if you choose this option, it will generate a new curve or table for each of the material you have. We'll talk about why you want to do that later. And you've got 7 condensed material. It's almost like a reverse version of the material to PID, material ID to PID. So this scans through all the material you have, and if it finds duplicate material based on their title parameter, for example, it would delete them, and the part would then only refers to a material ID that's the same throughout the different parts. And you've got set section ID to PID. So this is basically the same as the material ID to part ID. This allows you to associate a unique section label to every single part card, part ID. And we've got renumber include. So for each of the include, you can set a specific range. So again, like I said before, this is useful if you've got a big master keyword file with many different includes, and you can keep that so that you don't have clashing labels if multiple people working on different parts, and when you merge it back into the master. Declash labels, so this changes, this doesn't particularly apply to, it's a tool for Primer, but for other preprocessors. So some preprocessors may have problems reading in same material, same entity IDs, same entity ID, but dyna and Primer can read it fine. But this just allows you to offset, for example, solid elements and share elements, offset each other, the label offsetting each other so that they're not referring to the same ID. Visualize allow us to see the labeling ranges in a graphical form. And label range I won't really go into, but it looks into the format of the way the label is created. So there's small format or large format, or extended format. And then finally, you've got the lock labels, which allow you to fix a numbering range so that doesn't get renumbered or the ID gets observed. So let's look into these in a little bit more detail. So we've got the numbering content first. So this is the panel you will see when you click on that button. And the number of keyword there highlights on one will depend on what content you have in your model. So if you don't have any set solids, there won't be a button for that option. And in the second column there, you've got the current label ID starting from the lowest and on the left, and then the highest on the right. And 3, so this is one of the options we can have. So you can either renumber them arbitrarily, so that would preserve the existing gap between the labels, or you can label them sequentially. So it would do a simple +1 iteration for every single label so that they're all condensed, if you will. And on 4, you can input the initial value. So at the top there, you've got the blue box that's outside of all these keywords. That allows you to set a number for every single one of them, or alternately, you can choose for each of these keywords to have a separate independent initial value. And then on the right, it shows you what the target highest range would be if the numbering is carried out, and you can't change that. So that will be based on either your option of choosing either arbitrary or sequential. So that would change what the highest number will be. And you must click apply renumber in order for any of this to take into account. Otherwise, it would not save any of the information that you've changed. So that's important to note. Latent items by default will not be renumbered. So these could be a material ID, for example, that is not in this specific file. You could be referring to a file elsewhere, but if the material card is not in it, the ID would the letter would be turned blue during a normal pick menu, and that just allows you to keep that reference for when you say you merge them all back together. It doesn't lose that referencing. And we also have a button for post renumber label declash there. At the moment is here set off. I'll discuss this later on. So it's I already mentioned before, is for certain processors where you can't have the same labels, for example, between solid elements and beam elements, so they have to be separate. So that option allow you to offset those labels for different types of keywords. And if you click on those individual buttons, you can actually dive in a little bit more detail for that specific type. So here you've got the renumber nodes panel up here. So if you click on the node from the previous page, you will bring this up. So that allows you to have a little bit more control to see what the effects would be and the range as well. So in the previous the renumbering content, the main panel there, you will renumber everything of that type. But here you've got the option of selecting item range, and you can just select a range that you want to change. And so this is similar to, it's the same as the previous menu. You've got the initial value, and again you've got the arbitrary and sequential, but you also have a fixed gap. So if you want a regular gap between element, you can choose that here. So once you tick that, the gap size would then become activated, and you can select the number you want to put in. And you can also ask Primer to do a clash check, and you can choose a model ID that you want to check against, and what type, if any. And again, you must press change numbers to see what it will look like. And once you're happy with it, you must press update labels in order for the changes to take place. Otherwise, it would not change any labeling. So on the main panel, there are a couple of buttons at the top of the panel. So you've got some additional options for renumbering. So you can access that by clicking that option button, or you can alternately click on the toolbar at the top. There's options and program options, and you need to select the renumber category. And you can see there are different options depending on what you want to do, and if you have a preference, you might want to choose that so you don't have to select it every time for later on. So we're going to switch to Primer to show you some of these buttons in action. So here I've got a Honda Accord model that is readily available online, and I've read it in, and we have changed it to separate include files, as you can see here. So you've got the master keyword, and then each of the components are separated out into each of the includes. So if I go to the renumber panel, so if we select model and renumber, and again here you can see which model we've selected, because there's multiple model read in this Primer session, and we're going to select renumber. So this shows the panel we've just seen before. Again, you can you can click some options. So for example, here it started off with quite a big range, because each of the include have a numbering defined numbering range. But if I put it sequentially, say to 1 for nodes, you can see it would create the numbering from 1 up to almost 200,000. So that's how many nodes there are. And again, so that initial value button just show you can enter a value there and it will change everything, so you have to do them individually. And if you want to look at each of the characters, you can select, you can click the button, and this is what you can choose to renumber a specific range, for example. If I want to only select the 21 million to say 3 million. And again, so for that, you might want to change that number to a very high number. And then if you press change number, you would see you've got the current label and you've got the new label. So a number of shell elements have been changed, and you can see what the new range is going to be simply by looking up and down this list menu. And also the options that we spoke about, you can find here, and here's the gap size, which has got some default options for you. And like I said before, you can choose to see if there's any clashes with any other type of element. So so I've clicked change number, and say if you're happy with the way the labels are currently looking, and you can just press update labels here, and then you should see the shell has now changed value from previously. Okay, and yeah, so you've also got the or sequential as well, which does the same thing as clicking sequential and then putting an input value of 1. Or you can reset all if I didn't like any of those options. And here, the option menu you can look at, and alternately you can access it by clicking options in toolbar, program options, and select renumber, and you can take any of the preferences you want. Yeah, so if you do renumber anything, remember to press apply renumber, otherwise it will not change. Okay. So change model ID is relatively straightforward. You select the model you want and the free new label that you want to change it to, and simply press apply. And condense model, similarly, it doesn't give you any other option. You just click it and immediately take effect. It just condenses all the model starting from 1 and sequentially upwards. And changing these model IDs will not affect them its contents. So let's just quickly do that. So currently, you can see I've got model 2, 3, and 4 read in. So if I do renumber change model ID, for example, I can change model 4 to, so I'm happy model 4, and say I want to change it to 10, and you can press apply. So it gives you a little message that says your model has been renumbered, and if I look at the list, you can see the model 4 has been changed to 10. And if I press condense model ID, and you can see that no longer becomes active, because if you look at the list, it's already condensed, and so that's straightforward. Renumber selection. So this gives you more control of what you want to renumber. So the previous renumber content menu chooses everything in the model, but whereas this, you can it opens up a pick object menu, and you can choose it based on what you've got on the screen, or you want to drag a box around it. That's possible. And renumbering will only be applied to those items, and specifically if you tick yes. If it's on no, it wouldn't do anything, even if it wouldn't allow you to type in numbers, so you must select yes in order to apply any renumbering functions. Again, so this is similar to what we've seen before. This would be the current ID, and once you put in a value in the blue box, which is the initial label, then you would be able to see the changes, so the target. And you've got in bracket there, you've got the number of elements or nodes or number of selected based on out of how many in the total in the model. So you've got two different options there. You've got start at or offset. So start at just renumbers it sequentially, whereas offset allows you to input a number and add that to the initial label, and it basically just push them along a certain value. And you've got more information if you click the button. So at the top there, you've got all type and list status. That shows you what's being renumbered as a summary of everything. And you can also click these no clash or clash button to get more information in text as well. And if there is a clash, you can carry out an action. So Primer will offer 3 actions for a stat at option. But if you have an offset option, you can only shift upwards to make space. And if you renumber, if you select moving clash, then you'll be able to insert the labels next to three labels within the range, or the moving clash just simply ignores what's already there and just takes the highest number and then proceed sequentially from there. And again, latent items will not be renumbered, and they are reserved. So the renumbering options we see here will always work around them. And once you're happy with the renumbering, you need to press apply. And just to note, if there's a clash, Primer would not, the apply button would not be made active. So you need to carry on an action on the clashed items. So let's see that in action. So here you've got the pick menu. So you can, I'm going to select, for example, some parts. You can see I've selected 1,800 parts, and if I press select items, you can see what has been selected. And for example, if I want to renumber solid, and I'm going to have an offset of say 20 million. Yeah. And if I click on this no clash item, it allows me to see what's been done. So you've got the lowest selector label and the highest selector label and the number. And so it will show me what the new target range, which is just reflected here in the low high column. And it's telling me no clashes. So if I make it so that if I choose, actually, let me do that again and select a single part so we can create some clashes. So here, you can also do list status. It gives you all of the information from below. So at the moment it's currently on the 98 million range. So if I make that into So here you can see now it's detecting a clash. So if I click on the clash, it will tell me all of the, so I've selected 3,200 odd shells and all of them are clashing. So you can look at what the options are. You can either move clash to the highest label or shift them upwards to mixed base, or you can relabel them to the next 3 available ones. So let's just choose that. And now you will see there's a clash fix. Again, so that basically just tells you it's no longer a problem. But if I, and you can see now there's an apply button is now active, but if there were effects, you would not be able to select that. Okay, so I'm gonna just quit that for a moment and go back to the slides. Okay, so setting a material ID based on the part ID ID label. So as I mentioned in summary, so that just changes all the material cards to match with the part ID. So sometimes you can have many different material IDs that you don't know which part is referring to it. So this is a good option in order for you to quickly identify what material is referenced by which part. So this doesn't apply to part composite because you can have more than one material defined in the part composite card. So that won't be changed. And there are options to where to put this newly created material card, and it's the same with the section card as well. So you can see on the bottom of that renumbering panel, there's a tick box for where you want that to go. So that gives you control where you want that being created. On the LCSS and LCSR parameter, so that option only applies to these 2 materials. So you've got the piecewise linear plasticity and modified piecewise linear plasticity. So like I said before, it creates a unique curve or table ID for each of the materials, so that it allows for some stochastic variation when you run the model. So it just gives some random variability into the analysis, because if they're always if they're referring to the same curve ID, that might not happen. And if a material card is referenced more than once, they are automatically copied. So you would have the same material, same curve, if I should say, same curve and table are duplicated. And the condensed material ID button, it's almost a reverse of that material to part ID. So it detects all the parameters in all the material cards by type, and the parameters are detected up to 5 significant figures for floating points. And the curve ID is also checked as well. So if you've got the same material card but a different curve ID, then that won't be associated as the same material card. And the parts that are referred to duplicated material are basically they are the lowest material ID is then chosen and referenced by all these different parts, so that the other duplicated material will be made redundant, and a panel will come up to ask the user to delete either the materials in the curve. And you can also choose whether to consider having the same material title is duplicate or not. And the section to PID card now is the same, basically the same as the material to PID. So all the section cards will be given a unique ID, the same ID as the parts. And the section cards will be copied if there's more than one part referring to it. Something to watch out for the material and section ID options. If you select that and they're already existing section or material card with a part label that's the same as a part label, it will overwrite that, and basically you will lose that material section card that has got the same part ID. And it's important to note you cannot undo these options. So once it's done, you can't. There's no undo button at the moment for that. And unreferenced section cards are also deleted. So if you've got anything that, for example, you're working in a include file, and if it is referenced by another include file, but you choose this function, then that will get wiped out, and so you might have a missing reference from another include. So something to be careful. So next we're looking at the renumbering includes. So instead of basing on the type of keyword the model has got, this looks at the include file. So like I said before, this is useful if you've got a big model with many different includes. On the first column, on number 1 there, you've got the name of the include, and you've got a column for range unique. So Primer detects if there are currently any overlaps in the start and end, defined start and end of a label range for one of the includes, and scan it against the rest. And 3, we look at whether the entities within that include are in the range. And the way the renumbering range is defined is split into 2. So general basically means pretty much all of the keywords. So that would be, for example, part, material, section cards, etc., etc. And column 5, you can see the top there, the heading. Those stands for nodes, element, node sets, NRBs, etc. So those tend to be a lot more numerous than the number of parts and materials. That's why it's normally at a bigger range. And at a common practice is to multiply by, say, 100 from the general labeling range, so that it still looks so the beginning digits are still the same, and at a glance you can almost see which includes is associated with. And you've got the Primer gives you the option of auto selecting a range. So if you select auto, it will detect the number of the entity you've got and prescribe a tight range around those existing nodes. Existing entities. So you can obviously use that to see where the range are and then modify it. And button 7 is a detailed option if you want to dig into the specific keyword types within each of the include. You can click on that, and we'll go in a little bit more details after this. So this is just the list that I've been through, label 1 to 7. So the detail range, you will see if you click on it, this panel will show up on the right. The big panel on the right will have all the entity types. Although you might not necessarily have that entity, you can still prescribe a range to it. And you can see in the example there, I have selected, I've made active the shell, solid, and node, and I've given a range for those 3 types. But you can see that the solid is not in range. So that's so a red box comes up that says no. You can actually get more information if you click on that triangle and click information, or you can right click again for information, and you can also renumber from right clicking or selecting that little arrow as well for the drop down. And once you're happy with the range, you can press save and close. And it will change the color of the detail button. So there are three options, so there are three colors. You've got gray, which is inactive. So if you didn't change any of the number ranges, if you didn't select any of the entity types and prescribe a range, then it will remain gray. Green means you have selected a specific label range, but all the entities are obeying that numbering range. Whereas red is when there is entities that's outside of the defined label. So if we go back to the main panel, you will see there are a couple of buttons at the top. So you've got read and write CSV. So that allows you to write out existing numbering range. For example, if someone else worked on the numbering range, you can just get them to write that out, and you can read that in straight away, and Primer will detect that. So that's useful to have. And you've also got the copy, the node, element, range, etc. to the general. So that just duplicates the big numbers to the general number. And there's also a sort button you can do as well. So at the moment it's on retain original order, but if you click on that, it will flick through the different options you can. So you can either sort by general range or node and element, etc. range. And if you press apply, although there are clashes, some pop-up warnings will be shown, and it will tell you, for example, if there's a range clash, as there is in this example, and you can actually choose to proceed. So you can actually still carry on as normal, but it just tells you there might be a clash further down the line if you create a certain entity. And if you have entities out of range, it will prompt you to do something. So there's the option of renumber into range, and it will tell you what give you a number, what they are, and it will select the first unused label and start populating them. But if you've got the total number of that entity is actually larger than the range you've given it, then it will come up with a warning and then ask you to increase that range. Yeah, so like I said, it will try and fill up all the gaps within the range, but once those are filled, then it will start sequentially from the highest ID, adding 1. So let's see that in action. So here you can see I've got the clashes, and as any of the red buttons, you can right click or click on that arrow, ask for more information, and then it will tell you what it's clashing against. And similarly for the in range, you can ask it for a summary, so that just give you a total number and the type, or you can look in detail and it will tell you what each of the individual labeled as clashing is. And then the last option is to renumber into range. So you can just right click select, and Primer will then go through all the clashing labels and label it into range. And now if I looked at a detailed button, so that's pretty, as I've explained before, you can give each of these a specific range. And if I do so here it will tell you, so I've given the solids a lower range, and basically it noticed that the range in the main panel doesn't match with what I've got, so it will say, do you want to adjust? And if we select yes, then you will see that number will change basically, and now we can see clashes. So you can either renumber here, or you can renumber in that detailed panel there. So you can, yeah. And if I've got, like I said before, if you've got the two red options or buttons showing red, you can either renumber after you press apply. So I can just say yes, and then it will also show you've got clashing numbering ranges. So that's, yeah, remember to apply, otherwise it won't save. I want to just go through the other buttons as well. So if I do a copy, you'll see now they are matching. So all the general now matches the bigger range. And you can click through the 3 different order sort options you've got to make it easy to see. And if you write a CSV, it will look something like this. So you will have the file names and then just the 4 columns for the start and end for general and node element label, etc. This is also useful if you want to renumber a lot of your includes, because if I just do a demo, if I change that number, you will see it does take a second or so, depending on the number of contents you've got in that include file, to change those numbers. So sometimes it's just easier to change it in the CSV and then just read that back in. Okay. So where is this information saved? So this is obviously a primer specific tool and function. So if you open a keyword file after you've defined a range, you will see that at the beginning under the star keyword line and commented out with the $sign. So this means that LS-DYNA is not going to read it. But if you close primer and open it, that information is stored at header. Similarly, if you have clashes, or if you have labels not in the range, and you can just ignore those warnings and press apply. And if you write those keywords out, there will be some warning and errors up the top as well. Okay, declash label. So like I mentioned previously, so if you're planning to use another preprocessor, they might struggle to deal with elements with the same labels. So by using this tool, you can declash them all, or you can specifically go into the element. You can only declash elements or sets or the thermal materials, so that you won't come into any problems when you use other preprocessors. But like I said, both Primer and LS-DYNA will read those as separate entities. So the solids and the shells can have the same number because it knows that we're referring to different things there. And if you don't have any clashing labels, I believe the button will be inactive, so you can't even select that. And you can visualize the declash as well. So before you operate on the clashing labels, you can see where they are, and you can do it only as well just to see it. So the previous post number label declash basically just sets that so that primer knows not to have duplicate labels for materials, and similarly for sets and the structural materials and thermal materials, for example. and it's also available under that program option renumber, and you can tick that avoid label clash button. Okay, so this is perhaps one of the most used tools that I personally when I work with Primer, that's what I use. So you've got the visualize button on that panel, and once you click on that, it pops up this graphic format to show you what the ranges you've got in your model and what's being used and what isn't. And you can actually interact with the bars as well, so that you can see what you're changing. So by default, it will be on entity. So that's one of the two options. And that splits each of the keyword types into different rows. And the black region or the black lines are the labels currently being used, and the white area are the free labels. So you can see we've got a pretty good numbering structure. You can tell by the lines. For example, the nodes are following a certain range, and they're normally at the start of the range, as you imagine. And when you hover over either the used regions or the free regions, Primer gives you some information on the selected, if you like, boxes. So if I hover over nodes, as is showing on the screen here, you've got node, and it's telling me it's free range, free label range, and what they are. Yeah, so there's just some sentences to describe that. You can also change how you view it. So the way it's shown at the moment by default is all of the label, but you might only want to investigate, for example, in the 30 million range, so you can zoom in, and you can do that by either holding Shift or Control and using the right mouse click and slide that along, or you can pan using Shift Control, holding Shift Control, and then using the middle mouse to pan. So that's similar. So that's the same as the graphical interface of Primer and Diffreplot, etc. And you can press that AC button top right to show all again. So what else can you do? You can ask Primer to write out what you're seeing on the screen, and you can produce that as a CSV. So that is on the top right, there's a write button, and the format would be, as you can see, so what entity is, and the way it ranges is in pairs. So you can see there you've got the used label, so it will be 1 to 1000 will be used, and then a space in between, and then 2000 to 2300 are also used. So it's basically use free, if you like, so you can identify what range is being used. And you can actually drag the numbering range to shift to another number by left clicking and then dragging on the black regions, or you can right click on the regions and it gives you a list of options of action there. And if you right click on the free range, the white area, basically you've got option of renumber the labels to that free region. So besides the entity option, you've also got the include, which instead of splitting it into entities, into the keyword types, you've got the include view. So you can see now each of the row corresponds to a separate include file. And once you click that, there is additional tick boxes for general and node numbering range, as we've seen before. So let's quickly go through that. So under entity, like I said, if you hover over the regions, it will tell you either it's use or free, and you can also, so if it's used, I can drag it, and you can see there's a green box with the new range. And if I actually hover on the existing black region, it will tell me it's turned red, and so that tells me it's clashing with existing labels. And if I drag and let go of the mouse click, it will tell you, it will ask you if you want to renumber, so you can yes or no. And similarly, if you right click, you can renumber to here, and then select the entity you want to be in that range. And there's also a multi-select as well, so it's not only one region you can act on. So if I right click and select multi-select, and I can actually drag a blue box around, and so after I've dragged it, I can move them together, and you can see they've all shifted. And on the scrolling, so I can hold down Shift and Control and slide as I would on the normal display, and middle class to pan left and right as well. And you can see when I move it, the range shown here is also, it also changes with it. So you can input the range you want. And if I look at include, again, you can see the different color boxes for the two different numbering range. And if you want to increase or decrease a range, you can actually see when you hover over it, there's a box around the range, and if I'm on the right hand side of the box, I can actually change the upper limit, and again it will ask you for confirmation, or similarly you can drag the left hand side to change the lower limit, and also you've got the panning option as well. So yeah, you'd need to select the box. Sorry, there's no panning option. That's what I'm saying. You can drag the lower end and then the upper end to get into the range you want. Okay, I think that's it, and that's the right button you can see there. Okay, I think we're coming towards the end. So one of the last options is the lock labels. So you can select a locked range for a specific include and a specific type, so that ensures nothing else is written in that range, or it won't move even if it's selected. So that option it's available here. You can just add them as you see fit. Yeah. And once you've filled in the information, it gives you the option to add another row, and you can populate it as you will. Okay. Yeah. So also the tick box, the safe range and protect ranges, so that you don't go into it. Otherwise, if that's unticked, then other entities might be renumbered into the range, but your save ranges would still be the same. Okay, I've shown that. Okay, I think that is pretty much the end of the webinar. Sorry I started off a bit late. But if you have any more questions based on what you've seen or the information you have, you can contact your local distributor, as you can see on the screen now. And you can either ring or you've got the email address you use as well. Just a note that if you're interested, if you want to know more about the Oasys software, there are other webinars, and you can look at the previous webinars. We have a video library, which you can select anyone you want to see. Alternatively, you can ask for any information, ask for a webinar that we don't currently have. So That's it. Has anyone got any questions? Okay, I can't see anything at the moment. Like I said before, all the slides and the link to this recording will be sent to you soon, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you for attending.